Welcome to Kermode Uncut. Earlier on this week, the Oscar nominations were announced. If you're a regular here, you'll know that I used to do this thing called the Kermode Awards, which were sort of set up as a counterpoint to the Oscars. You could only win a Kermode for the categories from which you weren't nominated for an Oscar. Then, of course, last year, not only did Moonlight, the Best Picture of the year, get nominated, but it ended up winning the award for Best Picture. The Oscars got it right. So this was a kind of big thing for me because the Oscars suddenly seemed to be on the side of the movies that actually I liked. Well, this year, the Oscar nominations are, if not perfect, pretty interesting. Firstly, the headlines. Numerous nominations for Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Screenplay, Best Cinematography, and also doing very well in the Oscar nominations, a bunch of nominations for Get Out, which is up for Screenplay, Actor, Director, and indeed Best Picture. Now, just think about that. You have a Best Picture category in which you have Get Out, a kind of horror movie, up against The Shape of Water, a fantasy film from Guillermo del Toro, who's one of my favourite directors of all time. Now, that in itself is a cause for rejoicing, and people have said maybe this is the moment that fantasy and horror cinema is coming into its own. If you look at the Best Director shortlist too, it's good to see that it isn't all male or all white, although the very fact that that is noteworthy is still slightly depressing, that in this day and age we should even notice such a thing. But it is an interesting category. My own feeling is that the award for Best Director will end up going to Christopher Nolan for Dunkirk, just because I think that is a brilliantly directed film, and I think that whatever people think about the movie, I think they think it's Chris Nolan's time to win the Best Director Oscar, but let's see. Moving on down, Best Actor, well, that's going to go to Gary Oldman. We've discussed Darkest Hour here on the blog before. I think his performance is great. I think he probably should have won the Oscar back in whenever it was, 2012, for Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. But the fact is, Darkest Hour isn't a brilliant film, and also in that category, Daniel Kaluuya for Get Out. Now, I would really be happy if Daniel Kaluuya won for Get Out. It's not going to happen. It's definitely going to be Gary Oldman. But wouldn't it be great if Daniel Kaluuya just pipped him at the post? When it comes to the Best Actress category, I think it's a title fight between Frances McDormand, who I actually think will win, and Sally Hawkins, who is brilliant in The Shape of Water. But also in that category, I mean, Saoirse Ronan, who's fantastic in Lady Bird. And don't overlook Margot Robbie, who is dynamite in I, Tonya. When it comes to Best Supporting Actress, I think it's definitely going to be Leslie Manville. She's fantastic in Phantom Thread. I mean, it's a really, really great performance. She dominates the screen, even when she's on screen with Daniel Day-Lewis, who is such a kind of all-encompassing performance. But then in that category, it's very, very strong. She's up against Laurie Metcalf for Lady Bird, Octavia Spencer for The Shape of Water, Alison Janney for I, Tonya, and Mary J. Blige for Mudbound. So I think that category is a really hotly contested category, but I do think it's going to be Leslie Manville's year. When it comes to Best Supporting Actor, all the money at the moment is on Sam Rockwell for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, although I do think there's a possibility that Willem Dafoe will actually take that statuette home, not least because The Florida Project, which is a brilliant film, has been completely overlooked in all the other categories. So there'd be a certain justice in Willem Dafoe winning the Best Actor award. Looking further down the categories, in the Best Original Score category, I think it's going to go to Hans Zimmer, but the really big news is that Johnny Greenwood has been nominated for Phantom Thread. I'm going to do a blog about that next here on Kermode Uncut. Then in the cinematography category, it's really fabulous that for the first time we have a female cinematographer nominated for her work on Mudbound, Rachel Morrison, but also a 14th nomination for Roger Deakins for Blade Runner 2049. Surely this is the year that Roger Deakins finally becomes an Oscar winner. In the original screenplay category, it's worth noting that there is a nomination for Emily V. Gordon and Kamal Nanjiani for their brilliant work on The Big Sick, which I love and I think has got a chance of winning in that category. But going back just finally to the Best Picture category, you look at the really big hitters, you look at things like 3 Billboards, you look at things like The Shape of Water. I have a sneaking suspicion that the film that's going to take the Oscar for Best Picture is Lady Bird, which a lot of people love and a lot of people like, but no one actively dislikes. If you look back over the history of Oscars and think of films like Crash or Shakespeare in Love, or I think most classically Driving Miss Daisy, often the thing which wins the Best Picture award isn't necessarily the film about which people feel most passionate, but it's the one about which people don't feel any negativity. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Lady Bird is brilliant. I think it's brilliantly directed, and congratulations for Greta Gerwig for getting that nomination. But I also think it's the kind of movie that sort of just sneaks up on Oscar night. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if, despite other movies getting loads of nominations and loads of press interest, that in the end, it's not Lady Bird that takes home the big prize.
I want you to be the very best version of yourself that you can be.
What if this is the best version?